Hi, everyone. Welcome to this groundbreaking journey under our year's theme Art, Afrofuturism, and Geography Designing an Equitable and Feminist Future. My name is Véronique Kutiyo, pronoun she, her, and I am the founder of the Afrotech Fellowship Program. And we are very grateful to be one of the sponsors for the Black History Month event series this year. I'm really thrilled to be with all of you here today as we embark on this journey through not only Afrofuturism, but also data and the importance of celebrating exceptional ingenuity flourishing across the African countries. Before we deep dive into our subject, I want to let you know what is Black History Month. So this month, we are hosting a series of weekly conversation with artists, geothinkers, and innovators. Our conversation will focus on imagining and creating tangible pathways towards a world where equity, feminism, and Black prosperity are realities. So today we embark on this journey where we'll explore, create, and lead the way to an equitable and feminist future. This particular session with our guest today is an exploration of technology. So it's an invitation to be part of a bigger community where we'll be celebrating innovation, we will encourage collaboration, and we will amplify the voice of trailblazers in the field. So, do you belong in the session? Whether you are a tech enthusiast, you might be a GIS professional, a geography professional, or simply curious about the evolving landscape of African innovation, this is an opportunity to be inspired, informed, and engaged by our speaker's journey. So, without waiting any further, I'm going to now introduce our wonderful guest today, Yariwo Kitiyo. So I've had the pleasure to meet Yariwo through another networking connection, and she's a leading GIS specialist and data analytics expert with over 6 years of experience implementing and working with enterprise solution in fast-paced environment. She is currently the head of data and analytics at Proto Energy. She has multiple accomplishments, like being featured in Geospatial World Rising Star 2022 and 30 Under 30 Women Breaking Barriers in STEM. Furthermore, she's recognized by the Maoiso Institute and Einstein Forum for blending science, tech, innovation for socioeconomic development. But you might think that that's it, that's all Yariwo has done. On top of being an amazing GIS professional, very passionate about learning her industry, she has created spaces to empower and uplift over African professionals, starting with her being the co-founder for Women in GIS Kenya. She is also the host of the Geohabari Podcast. And Geohabari is on a mission to tell the technical tales that are shaking up things and making waves across the continent. It is a unique tech podcast. I've had the pleasure to listen to some episode myself, and it really centers around our theme of Afrofuturism. It aims to also inspire the next generation of African technologists and entrepreneurs by highlighting solutions that address unique challenges and improve the quality of life for people in Africa. The word Geohabari is derived from the Kiswahili habari, which means news, and geo from geography. So I gave you an extensive introduction of Yariwo, but this conversation is really about shedding light about what inspired her and what were the important moments in her journey to who she is right now. But before we delve into deeper question, hi Yariwo, welcome. I have a fun question for you. You have to choose between three categories: education, scenario, and future? Which one would you choose?
Between education scenario and
Future.
I think future.
Oh, interesting. That's perfect. That's on theme. I didn't ask Yariwo to choose this question, but she's going on theme. So let me shuffle it a little bit. And
Hope it's not
oh,
hard.
that's a big question. No,
Okay.
I mean it's actually. I almost feel like it
Okay.
should be part of the interview question. What
Okay.
aspects of your current role most align with where you see yourself in 5 years? That's a little card. And that's actually feel like a great question.
Oh wow. Okay, so my current role currently revolves around data and a lot of community empowerment and highlighting African stories and just spotlighting the technical brilliance that exists across the continent. So the question was, what aspects of that influence the future? I would say definitely the people definitely in what I currently do, and the excellence that the people come with. So it's really that it's the wholeness of the people and how beautiful they are as a whole, from both a technical perspective, but also the impact that they have across the continent. So I'd say, yeah, those roles, data, the intersection of data, tech, and people really is what I'm excited about, and that would definitely connect with me as well in future. It really would influence that as well.
Yeah. The first time Yariwo and I had a conversation we about GIS, especially, I remember we noted the challenge that there is to learn GIS when most of the content is geared toward the West and not relevant to the local context and the lack of data. So you have been in GIS for many years now. I want to know a bit about your journey, right? I think you say your current role has a lot of data merged with people. Like, what's your journey in the GIS field, but also what inspired you to become this trailblazer in the African tech advancement? Because you're not just being a GIS professional, you're really creating spaces for innovation and advancement and collaboration in that space. So what was your journey a bit like?
Oh wow! Thanks, Veronique, and thanks for that very generous introduction. Okay, so my introduction into JS is quite different. I didn't do JS in school. I did My background is in environmental sciences, and interesting enough, you would think we'd have like a lot of modules with GIS within an environmental course, but that wasn't the case. I think we had one or two theoretical modules around, I think, introduction to GIS and introduction to remote sensing. That was all we covered within my 4-year undergraduate course. So I would say my what really forged me and my journey was my first engagement, which was at Esri, and my role was not even technical. Literally, it was a training administrator role, and so that was really around structuring classes, marketing our training courses, a lot of coordination and setting up of classes. So that means ensuring the desktop computers were well set up. They had the correct software for each module. So that was my introduction. But interesting enough, I think that was really my introduction because I really liked the aspect of software installations for preparing for classes. So I wasn't the instructor at that particular point in time. I was really just, you know how you cut and raise for someone. So that's what I was doing. I was basically setting up computers, ensuring they ran, troubleshooting, and that was it. That was what I was doing, and I think that was my turning point, because I think at that point is when I realized I actually want to do this. I love this. I love what this represents. Just looking at the power of the software. And so that forged, or sort of that is what really inspired the creation even of Women in GIS Kenya, because at that particular point is when we really could interact with a lot of clients. I would interact with them and I would know their stories and their backgrounds and how they're using tech to help government understand flooding, help government understand food security. And so I was fascinated at that particular point with those interactions. And yeah, so that really is what shaped my introduction into GIS. And then now the community and just the aspect of building a community, because that's really what inspired Women in GIS Kenya. And then that snowballed into currently Geohabari. So it was really that was my introduction, and my inspiration was, I like to say, everything that comes out of me is um, sort of equipping my younger self. It's the things I really wished my younger self knew. So that's across the board. That was my first inspiration point, where I was just like, oh wow, I wish I knew this when I was in school. I wish I knew GIS could be used for this. I wish I met these people for me to know how my career would evolve or what it would look like. And so that's where it really comes from. It's really a dedication to my younger self. That's as well as Geohabari highlighting these stories. I think there's a lot of power in representation, and you being able to see a physical manifestation of what's possible is very game changing. It's really where it's at. It's you seeing that and seeing, oh wow, this is possible. Seeing people like you do the things you would want to do, or very inspirational things, are really what have shaped my journey, my GS journey, basically. So I would say that it would be people and a dedication to my younger self, and just creating for her for the things that I would have wanted her to know way before I even got in school or even into university. Maybe I would have changed my course. So that's really what inspired or keeps inspiring me every day, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything of what you've just said, I can connect to it because I went to a very similar journey. And that moment of thinking, there is so many applications of GIS in my community that could solve so many problems, is a big reason also why I gravitated toward GIS as a tool, as a learning path. And I wish I was introduced to it earlier for more than just map, for just more than just making maps. And I think to kind of transition to the next question, which you've already kind of answered elements for the next question, is really, you know, I understand what was your inspiration for starting it. You really wanted to put that technology in the hand of more people and empower others toward this career and toward this knowledge, not just this career. But if you had to think about your impact, right? You created Geohabari more recently. What impact did you hope to achieve, especially that, I've started a nonprofit recently. I've done community project. It's a lot of work that you're not prepared to
Yeah.
take on, but you once you're in it, you still take it on. I want to know like what impact that makes you power through all these obstacles that I'm sure you faced along the way setting up both Women in GIS Kenya and Geohabari.
Oh wow, impact and community. I think I will focus on a couple. Let me focus on projects as a very central pillar. That's a very common theme across Geohabari and Women in GIS Kenya. So yeah, it's true. It does come with chaos. That was a very chaotic point when we were starting out before we had structures. So that's very relatable. I would say the very first one, which naturally came to us. I'm a co-founder, so I have three other co-founders. It was really for Women in GIS, was between me and my friends, and it was just us lunch conversations on very normal conversations around, oh, like how do you see yourself progressing here? Have you seen someone you'd like to be like? Those were some of the conversations we were having. But I think the pivotal point for me personally was the novel uses and use cases when it comes to spatial data, and that really shaped when you kind of just go online and look at Women in GIS projects and even some of the projects that Geohabari is highlighting. It was really the rarely or the use cases we rarely hear of. And Women in GIS I'll start with Women in GIS and maybe transition that, because that really, I don't know. I don't know how to talk about myself without talking about Women in GIS, because that really is what created Geohabari, and it was a snowball effect. So what happened is during COVID and even before COVID. So how Women in GIS used to how we used to operate is we'd have trainings, and these were hands-on physical technical trainings, and then we would have physical events for networking. And for trainings, we realize the way you're saying use cases are very, we rarely have African use cases. And when we do, it's the mainstream ones. It's earth observation, it's food security, it's infrastructure, roads. And we were like, there's so many other things that we can use this for. And as we went in tech, we already knew the challenges we had, right? Gender-based violence, teenage pregnancies, cervical cancer treatments and awareness. intimate partner violence in African homes and even across the globe. That's still a thing. The other thing we're looking at is transportation, right? When you look at transportation, we only talk about, roads and planning. No one talks about how do we view transport when it comes to our safety. Would I get into a public bus if it's just men? Would a man get into a bus if it's just women? And just trying to understand what are the gender angles to transportation. And for me, that was really the impact that we wanted to really have in the community and just have quote unquote uncomfortable conversations around data. And it's pretty interesting because I think the turning point for us and for all our training sessions, they were all focused on these scenarios. They were very intentional on we are focusing on gender issues, we are focusing on issues that affect marginalized communities and minorities. Women are part of that, children are part of that. And one of it that was very monumental was understanding why aren't women doing cervical cancer tests? What does that mean? Well, one of the findings for that is they didn't know government has free offerings and where these facilities are. That's like a very simple map where you're just showing women and telling them there's a check next week, you need to go. But also just being able to sort of also break the myths around breast cancer and cervical cancer. That was one very powerful use case that came out of it. Another one was understanding teenage pregnancies during COVID. And we were supporting the State Department for Gender with that. And I think so for me, that was really what really shifted my mentality. And that was like the main inspiration points was just I want to see new use cases for data and I want gender to be right at the center of it. I want us to understand not just food security, it's what does this mean for women? What does this mean for kids? What does this mean for a minority group? And even for the men, when you're looking at the data, is when you start seeing the patterns within the data. And so that was our main inspiration points, really. And for me, that was really what kept me pushing through it. And then fast forward to Geohabari and still around communities is now, yes, you have these use cases, right? How do you transition that? And who are the people who are making these waves across the continent using data? Because when you talk about, and why our tagline for Geohabari is building technical brilliance and elevating that. For me, technical brilliance is not just a tool. It's not just a report. It's not just a cool PowerPoint or quote unquote a sexy visualization that a techie has created. For me, it's end to end. It's yes, you created it, but how did it trickle down to communities? How did it help? How did it empower communities? And I like that I hope I do justice to the stories I put on Geohabari, because that's the essence. It's really to embody that and to show how tech translates to better and well-being of communities and societies, and just these solutions that are well crafted for us, for our continent, and not just a template that's been moved from one continent and just sort of mashed onto Africa as a blanket solution. And that's what Geohabari really stands for. And yeah, then women in GIS as well. So I hope I've answered that. I hope I've answered that question, Veronique.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely have. Your impact is really about creating like spaces and conversation that elevate how the technology is being used in a practical sense, right? Because we've talked how so much can be done with the technology, but and I have seen this with my current work here with women as well, is that even with a survey, there's so many answers that you could answer to problems, that could shed light to applications of technology, but also bring solutions that don't necessarily lies in complex nationwide program, but could be really localized. I think it's really about scale, in that way, right? Because the solution are really at the scale level. And so, I think kind of transitioning about this, and you've talked about kind of the trends in tech that you think. I think this word trend in tech is kind of a tricky one, right? Because a lot of the GIS technology has been around for a very long time, but not just GIS technology revolving around geography. technology as an umbrella overall, a lot of these technologies have been out there, AI, machine learning, for quite a while. So sometimes people get hooked onto this trends. And I want to know from your perspective, are there trends that you feel like, that you've witnessed, that you've like, okay, these are something that really gives me hope, that makes me really thrilled about what's coming up? Because I think trends is such a difficult word, because in so many ways, a trend in my community can just look like people are finally able to create a short survey and collect data and have it go into a repository that could be the innovation within that particular community, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to get your thoughts about even the concept of trend and things you've witnessed that provides you with hope.
Yeah, and I like to agree, and I really like to agree with that. The fact that these, I like to call them like buzzwords, and then there's actually impactful tech that really shapes communities. I think for me, I think anyone who's ever created a field application for collecting data can never do wrong in my eyes, honestly. Because for me, field apps, mobile apps, like when you're talking about like ODK, Kobo, for me, those are still, I think they will always be they'll always be, for me, those tools have really changed how we look at data and how we look at empowering communities. So I would say that, and definitely I look at more infiltration of that into rural settings, into having more mappers and community mappers who are not necessarily tech people, because I think, as for me to be able to put a data point of my community or what my community is experiencing and being able to map that really um, helps a lot with what's happening and helps to highlight some of the issues. So for me, I'd say really mobile apps really changed that. And I see that every single day. And even for one of the episodes of Geohabari is really about communities, and I've realized across all the episodes I've had, I think for even for the upcoming ones, mobile apps are like a game changer for African countries. I know it looks like it's something so simple and it's not as impactful, but for me that's the main tool that I think we need to push more. I think the other one was that I was really still really looking forward to is, and this came from what I've seen with impact with the State Department for Gender, which is like one of the highlights I think I'll have for the rest of my life. For me to have for some of the projects we are doing, and for State Department of Gender, which is in Kenya, focused on gender issues and some of the issues I've highlighted, for them to just sit back and just agree that yes, we do need this solution. We do need to start looking at data from a gender angle, because that's the other thing. And so for me, I think the other thing that I'm really looking forward to, and I'm really excited because I'm starting to see that more even locally and across the continent, is we are more aware of what data can do. We are not threatened by data, and that makes me so happy, because one of the things I also realized when you're building a community, even for some of the projects you are looking at in supporting government ministries and supporting leaders serve their constituents better, there's a perspective that data is a threat. There is a perspective, and how your approach really matters as a community leader, as someone who's trying to build a technical community. You need to be very intentional how that approach is, in terms of we are using data to empower you and to show you key insights and to show you issues within your constituency or issues that the young people are facing in your community, and not using data to highlight the things you're not doing. And so when you look at it from that approach, we noticed there was more. We are actually embraced it, and I'm really excited because that's what really sparked conversations around the State Department of Gender focusing on getting GIS solution. And so data definitely is not really a trend globally, but in African countries, I think I love the fact that we're embracing data more, mobile applications more. I looked at the State of the Map Africa report, and 48% of youth mapper communities are in Africa, and that makes me so excited. It just shows that's really the go-to. It's really the go-to, like that we are putting our continent more on the map across issues, across flooding, buildings, the different problems that we face across society. So for me, I'd say those two honestly. And I mean, yeah, the buzzwords that are really good to look at, but I think impact-wise, those are the main ones for me. It would be build ups and just data, seeing governments embrace that, seeing NGOs embrace that, and shape programs that really impact us, then that's what really excites me. And yeah, I would say those. Those two.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you 100% because when I shifted from doing field work and having to write everything on paper and being in the middle with my heavy GPS, although you might still need a GPS, but um, there is really this aspect of collecting data can be a challenge for a lot of communities. So, how do we eliminate barriers to collecting, um, accessing, visualizing, but also ensuring the quality of the data? Field apps provide not all the solutions, but provide a lot of the solutions to those challenge. And one of the reason I've I've also find them amazing because in essence they might not feel like the most technical part of certain GIS workflows that exist out there or science workflows or tech from a tech perspective, but we have a huge gap in data, a tremendous gap in data, and African countries face a lot of challenges, but we're also huge consumers in society. So we need to understand our where we are at. And I think with the with tools like Fields app, also we also putting the hands into community that may not have been able to collect that kind of data before and make it accessible to a larger audience to drive decision making. So I'm 100% on board. As a small African island, I'm a big advocate for using encouraging the use of more field apps also for data validation and trying to get those data more accessible and out there. So kind of shifting more on a personal level, you've gone through a career and you can tell me my career has just been a smooth easy ride like from the beginning. um,
Yes.
I think for people that embraces careers in technology in Africa, there is this hype around it, right? And across the globe, right, to have a career in technology. And but yet there might be many challenges along the way that that makes it feel like having a career in technology, again, it's a huge umbrella term, may feel unattainable. And not just GIS, right? As from your context and from your lived experiences, like what are the challenges you've observed throughout your career for yourself, but also for your community, for your wider community?
Oh wow. Where do I start? I would say I think the first one is pay gap. I think there's a huge pay gap when you look at rates at where a GIS role sits globally in different companies across different continents. For example, you look at a company based in Kenya and you look at a company based in, for example, where I don't know, in the States, for example, any other part of the continent, our rates are definitely not there yet. Even when you look at Glassdoor reviews and when you look at like the question and the people who've answered it, you can just see, oh wow, there's a big gap. And we previously done, there was a community survey that was done by someone in the community locally to just look at a different pay rates across the market. And I can for sure say pay gap is a big thing. Of course, understandably, somehow, but also not very understandable. Simply because why I'm saying understandable is I like how we're shifting to recognizing what GIS really means. So there's definitely a promise to that and that changing as well. But I'd see pay gap. I think the second thing I would say is there's this thing where companies, and I've experienced that, do not necessarily look at GIS as part of a very key part within a company. It's normally like, oh, they're getting a GIS guy, but he can sit or he or she can sit at that far corner, and then the tech team can sit on this other side. And so for the GIS guys, like that, when like for them, it's just like those. separate workflows that they do by themselves when a company needs a map or when they need to show a cool visualization to just show, we're doing maps as well. And that's been a challenge as well, where we are not seen as part of a creation process. And I think I'm really thankful to how the industry is evolving, because now what you're seeing is we're part of the creation process currently compared to where we were previously. Because I know when I was getting right into the market, I think the only roles I knew locally were I could either be a cartographer, I could either get into surveying, or I could either be a developer and just create my applications that are used primarily just to solve location issues. Can't be integrated into anything else. You just be an app where you do this and then that's it. It's not being integrated into a fast-paced environment. It's just being used sort of in isolation because no one really gets what that is. We don't get how to integrate it. And that was a big challenge. So I would say I would say pay gap, and definitely that thing where it's like it's still that thing that we really like, it looks cool, but we don't really know how to use it. That has been one of the challenges we've definitely faced. I don't know if there's this thing where I think it's part of pay gap really, where you look at, for example, international companies and remote work, which has really just shown how the talent that exists within this continent. And so when you look at like there's this thing they do, which is called, I think, the geographic pay rate, something where they normalize it based on your living status in your country. And so this means if I'm a techie working in Africa for an American company, my pay is not the same as a techie working in that same company, but they're based in America, right? That happens in several companies as well, and that's been a gap we've discussed in the community, right? Because that happens where my pay is not necessarily the same as the pay of my colleague who's based in the States. And normally the argument is standards of living and the cost when it comes to when you're looking at that. So that's definitely another gap I've looked at. I've definitely identified in the community, and I think it would, yeah, definitely. So I would say those three. Those are maybe the gaps I've seen and the challenges that I've experienced as well.
And I would say that they are interlinked, these two issues. The lack of understanding about what GIS is, right? Because I've had the opportunity to work both in the United States and like come back to Mauritius. And here at GIS and being in a tech role, even if it's not necessarily geography or GIS, when you say GIS, the few people that understand it often understanding it as a map making, I think it contributes to not getting access to well-paid job opportunities locally because it's not valued sometimes locally. And then internationally, it's valued, but we are now perceived as cheap labor. And to be honest with you, this whole adjusting to local rates makes absolutely no sense because qualifications are qualifications. Cost of living, because minimum wage in Mauritius is about $200 monthly, right? So knowing that if a US company is trying to align my salary to the local salary, there is huge pay disparities with people that are based here and working for US company and their US colleague. And they use the cost of living as a justification when everyone know most countries like minimum wage and cost of living are not factoring in real living conditions. And it's basically telling you if you have no personal aspiration, no ambitions like this, the kind of minimum wage. But unfortunately, because again, there's a lack of recognition locally about that, the the importance of the GIS, then we're not compensated either. We're compensated even less fairly locally. So it puts professional like us in a very difficult position because our countries of hemorrhaging talents, because this is when you see this mass movement of people from the African continents moving abroad to the West because they will then get paid the wage that they want with career progression more being more likely. And I think kind of to transition from that topic is now, you know, you have created this Geohabari, and there's a big part of that work around exactly shedding issues like this, the pay gap, the funding, what are the access to education opportunities. These are some of the conversations you've had through Women in GIS, but also through Geohabari, right? And what you really was striving really hard to do was to build community. And I can tell it's a crucial aspect of your work. Um, but, you know, we can't do it alone. And we've just being able to meet you and have this conversation has been really empowering so far outside of this current session. If you had to give any advice to others looking to create similar supportive and inclusive environments, what would that advice be?
Oh, wow. I'm going to give a cliche answer and then try and explain it. Um, I think I'd say show up as your authentic self, really. And why that's very important is um, like even when I was creating Geohabari and the idea behind it, it wasn't just the it wasn't just the like looking and featuring these guests and just the technical work they've done and the impact. I'm looking to highlight and embody them as a whole, like their full selves as they are. And that's why even when you listen to some of the conversation and the episodes, like the banter series or the studying abroad series where we talk about opportunities, and these are Africans studying abroad and they're talking about like the experience and how to apply, and their call to action being, we are a minority literally, please apply. It would be more adventurous if we could see more people like us. It would be more impactful. And so for Geohabari, really, what and why I'm saying authenticity is within the podcast or within the conversation, I'm very intentional on keeping what others would call bloopers, but I keep those. I keep the laughters. I keep the shifts into local dialect or the shift into an African language no one can understand. And that happens so naturally. Like even when I'm talking to speakers and I'm recording, and when someone is going through like an intense emotion or they're happy or they're shocked, I rarely hear, oh my God. It always, I hear, oh my God, once in a while. But sometimes, even within the podcast, when you listen to it, it's like shocks in like African words. Like someone will just shift and explain a concept in like Kiswahili, another one shift and explain it in Kikuyu, another one shift and explain it in a local dialect in Tanzania. And that's literally what I want to embody. I want all the episodes and all the guests to come in as their raw selves. I wanted to not just highlight their technical brilliance, but the beauty of the people across the continent, the culture, and how they're attached to where they come from, regardless of the impact and where they're creating this impact across. Whether it's they're doing it from Europe or they're doing it from America. It's really that. It's really to showcase that. And I think why I'm saying really authentic is like in one of the episodes on studying abroad, on like tips and tricks after like they've shared like this is how you should apply the structure of your CV, and then like the like one of the parting shots was like, please carry your spices. If you're from Kenya, carry your tea leaves. If you have natural hair, come with your dreadlocks. Or like be ready to come with your products and do bantu notes. And I keep those. I intentionally keep those. I do not intend to delete them. I do not intend to keep them as a separate segment that's like on. I really do keep them. And I think that for me, it's really authenticity. I think the other thing that's really important when you're building a community is have people in the room who can challenge status quo. Don't just have, and why that's very important, even for technical communities, is I realize the gap is, even within the conversation, like try and bring that out. It's yes, you're creating behind your desk, yes, but you need to be more aware of context of your data, so that you're not just creating solutions, just drive pushing it to whoever else to interpret it. And I'm talking at it from a data background. Just having context is very important. Having people in the room who can challenge status, when that means even for events that we host, and even for even the conversation in Geohabari, I do intend to host more policymakers. I do intend to host more people who can change the narrative. It is not just techies. I want to get the perspective as well of policymakers and their understanding of what tech means. And if this actually translates to shifts across their constituents, across how they're serving communities, across how they're impacting and creating jobs for young people. And so for me, it's really that don't just I would say don't just focus on the technical and the building of apps and how that comes about. Have it translate all the way out. So just have a program manager in there, and most importantly, boardroom people within your community, because that's how you create impact. It's not That's how you really get your work out there, not just getting it out there, but ensuring it gets to the end of the pipeline. So it's not just highlighting solutions. It's then what's the uptake, and what does this uptake mean to a farmer? And that's why in one of the episodes, I had a conversation with Kenya Space Agency to just understand we already know data gaps as techies. As a data person, I know gaps. As a researcher, I know gaps that we have in data. And what's the plan across government organizations across Africa? What's the plan for Africa when it comes to creating satellite constellations that enable us have granular data to highlight our issues and address food security, flooding, health? And so I would say that do not just focus on the technicalities. Have people who can challenge status quo, people who can change policy, people who can talk in boardrooms and live and talk about funding, because that's a gap within the conversations that I have. So I would say those two, authenticity and have people who can change status quo. Those two have worked for me at least. Yeah, and yeah, I would say though, I don't know. Yeah, I would say those two. I hope those are helpful.
I mean, I love your answers because I think about even my experience within my community with GIS. What I always tell them is I don't expect you to all be becoming technical professionals or doers, but I expect you to become critical thinkers of the information put in front of you. And if you think of the number of decision makers that are in important roles that get data put in front of them, and that data is not even questioned, right? We don't question, like, where does this data come from, who collected it, like, and you don't need to understand the ins and out of every step of the process, but you need to understand what questions were asked to collect this data and what questions will be asked now that we have these results, and how do we integrate these results and make decisions. And I think your point about authenticity is very relevant in that phase, because if we're not getting authentic contribution in this process, in the implementation of any technology, this is when we're going to have shiny pieces of technology put there. Because I think people often think that, oh, it must be so difficult to do remote sensing. And I'm like, yes, it is, but it's harder to actually write a good project scoping document than to actually deploy the technology.
Yeah.
Because you might not even that. Maybe all we need is still a print map, and that's okay to begin with, because that will tell us whether we need to scale from there. And I think it's really about asking the right questions. So I've asked you many questions. We have questions from the audience, Yariwo, that I want to ask you. So the first question, so I want to encourage, before I say that, I want to encourage people. No, they're not. I think I promise.
Okay.
It's related to what you've shared earlier. So it's all within it's still within our conversations. I want to encourage more people to post questions in the chat. So if you have more questions, go ahead, you can post it in the chat and I will ask the question live. The first question is, how are you using GIS to address teen pregnancy? I think across the continent is a bit big, but maybe, I don't know if what scale you've worked on, maybe you have and you can correct me. How do folks address this in countries where child marriage is still a thing? So I think there's two questions in there, because one is related to child marriage and one is teen pregnancy. Um, can be related, but not always. I know you mentioned earlier in some project looked at some of the question around even gender-based violence. Do you have some tangible examples that you could share a bit more about on these themes?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, where is that? Yes. So the starting point would be the data. I would talk about how we approached it, and the engagement with different stakeholders to just understand it even better. So the starting point was within our community, within Rebel.js, we have what we call data visualization challenges. So that means still within the themes of what we are focusing on as novel uses of spatial data, we would get the data from the correct approvals from Ministry of Gender, for example, or Ministry of Health, depending on what we are training on that particular month or within that particular quarter. We would get that data first internally, look at that data, and I would, so the starting point would be, is there data? Are you collecting data on teenage pregnancies, on child marriages? The obvious answer is yes. Government has a lot of data. The only difference is the format in which that data is. So yeah, that was the starting point. We got the necessary approvals, we got the data. And normally, of course, due to data privacy, this is anonymized data. So it's granular, it's aggregated at county level, at sub-county level, at whichever administrative boundary or that is relatable in your scenario. And so for us, it was aggregated at county level. So it shows like the county and the numbers and the dates and the temporal components of it as well. And so that's very useful information. And so the starting point for us was, you get the necessary approvals because you can't fight with government, and because again that creates that thing of you're threatening the existence of this ministry. So it's just collaborating with now the necessary authority, and we pushed that data out to the community. They created insights. Someone else created a research paper. Someone else created a script. We made it very open. This is the data. This is the objective. We want to understand teenage pregnancy patterns across the country. This was during COVID. And the other objective was, is there a spike because of did we have a spike during COVID, or have we had a problem? It's just that COVID is making it more, it's hitting the airwaves now because all the kids are at home. So yeah, we get to the community, and then when we're doing that, we engage the ministry. And I think that was another very pivotal moment, because the ministry was very open to it, and we went through that data actually with them after we got insights, and we had the community come in and present what they were doing on like a meet call, a Google Meet call, and we had one of the representatives within the State Department for Gender, just looping and listen to this conversation around tech and data and people presenting the different insights, because that's usually our way of creating impact. So we don't just do trainings, we have someone attend from wherever ministry that's relevant within that particular training. So I would say that would be the starting point. And then the second one now is engaging the necessary ministries. And what I think we need to realize as for me or as tech is you can't do it all by yourself, and that's where really engaging ministries come in. And for us, that was very central for the ministry to agree, and for even that was the other discussion points that led up to the ministry actually agreeing. And I still get calls on, hey, so we are still looking at this data, and we are now looking to apply for funding to get like a whole system for us to manage this better. But we got this consultant who did like a digital form, and now the data comes in a digital form for us to respond faster. For me, that's a win. That's a win for me. And so I would say that would be the starting point. Get to the data, understand the current scenario. Don't just go with narratives or social media rumors. Have that. Get a ministry of, not ministry, get the right stakeholders or partners to work with, even work with NGOs when we're trying to understand that, because that's where context comes in. It's not just, you've not just looked at the data and that's it. You've gotten context from guys in the ministry, because these are gender experts. These are people who know social behavior and norms and patterns. So they give more context into it. And then, interesting enough, they're the ones now who push it. They now put it in their presentations and talk about the role of data and why we need a system. And so that was our starting point. I hope that has addressed it. And it would be the same approach for time marriage depending on what your impact, what you want your impact to be, because our impact was very clear. We want to have uncomfortable conversations from a data angle. Let's talk about it. Let's not hide behind the usual use cases. There's so many other use cases for data, and ours was this was one of it. It was some of the issues that society really never talks about, or when we talk about it, the default answer is never, have you looked at the data? It's normally, oh, but where were they? What were they doing? It's normally that's what we were looking at. And so, yeah, it really depends on your situation. I hope this example has helped. Engage, I would say engage. Even if you don't have technical knowledge, engage, get the data, get an understanding, then engage with the right people.
Yeah, and the next question is actually a really good segue to that first question. Someone asked, as an equity enthusiast, right? There's a growing challenge of kind of, working on challenges like we've mentioned in the prior question. How do we achieve equity, without violating privacy? Like, and managing or using that data as surveillance tool against those communities or even the stakeholders, like you've mentioned, the governments. I think there's this fear around, okay, now you're going to use that data, and some of it might be available to a broader audience. And what are there's genuine concerns and harm that can come from going toward accessing and collecting more data and data privacy. So, how do you navigate, I would say, how do you navigate this kind of barriers, but also maybe even the conversations around these issues?
Oh, that has given me an idea for my next episode. I need to get someone in data and privacy and laws. I need to do that. Thank you for that question. You've inspired my next episode. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I think that's a really tricky one. Considering how now we have cookies all over, and you can't use a website without a cookie, so you have to say yes. You don't know what they're collecting. Without violating privacy, how do we better manage and use? But I think one of the things that's really primary is I think called data. I think ethics and ethics play a really key role. And I'm going to shift a bit to not just yes, we might have laws and policies, but I think there's also ethics that come with different projects. And I know that's like a lot to say when you don't really know who's handling the data, so we can't really hide behind we are hoping you're operating within the code of ethics that we are giving. So I would say one of the things that was really primary for us, and I've seen that even in the Kenyan government where they share data across health, the data they share is very anonymized. It's very aggregated. I've not seen data where they've shared the specific names and all that. So I would say anonymizing is really important, but also that's a really tricky question. Hmm. Without violating privacy. Oh wow,
I don't know if that's an answer to it as well, to be honest. What I genuinely think it goes hand in hand with your role in educating people around tech and the role that data can play, because the reason that there is so much challenge around what privacy is, you brought up the example of cookies. That's like, I mean, so many of us just sometimes randomly accept things
yeah.
when we're in our web browser without realizing. And even using social media, we freely just give access to a bunch of our data. And sometimes there's this fear around data privacy once it's collected, because especially if it's in the web and it's on an online platform, when I think the real data theft and is happening in a more insidious way. And I think that's why we need more. I encourage you to do your episode. I'll definitely listen to it around data privacy and laws,
I need
because
to do that.
I
Yeah.
think not just on like using the technology, but on understanding the ramification of security issues in collecting data and giving access to data to not just within Africa, but we get so worried about the community. What, where does this data go out to external data providers or even to the like outside it? Because Africa is often seen as poor, but Africa can contain 30% of the world's natural resources. And these resources are kind of exist in the data sphere. So we need to have a better understanding of what assets we have as continents, as countries. But we are at time, Yariwo. Thank you so much to the audience. Thank you so much to you for answering all my questions, all the audience question. It has been fun. Time has gone by really, really, really fast. I will quickly share my screen to get the audience a quick preview. So I want to thank all of you for attending tonight. Again, thank you, Yariwo, for this amazing conversation. I can't wait to listen to more of your podcast. Do you want to say any last word before I kind of wrap up the session?
Oh, wow. Yeah, listen to my podcast, obviously. So it's called Geohabari. It's the t-shirt I have on. Yeah, listen in, interact with us, subscribe to get notifications as soon as a new episode drops. Definitely, I think the other thing would be, I think I hope I do justice to the stories that I tell across this country. I hope I can represent even a fraction of what's really happening and just showcase the brilliance that is oozing out of the continent with all these projects. That's really the goal of the episode and the goal of Geohabari, to just highlight the distinct brilliance across the continent and just the technical excellence and brilliance across communities. So yeah, that's the goal. Listen in, subscribe. We have our social media pages, LinkedIn, Instagram, hopefully TikTok. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Interact with us. Let me know what you think. Link me up to people you think would be interesting to highlight across the continent, outside. Yeah, that's really what I would say, honestly. And thank you so much for this event. I'm grateful. I'm really humbled for being part of Black History Month with Nostal GIS. So thank you for that as well. Thanks, Veronique. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Like, I appreciate you for saying yes. I think saying yes in this industry, and we really wanted to celebrate you and your work with Joe Habari, you as a professional. And I want to remind everyone that this is not the last session. There are upcoming events, not only just this month for Black History Month, we have Women History Month coming up. We also have our release of the North Star Gaze podcast on March 5th, 2024, so this year. And all the Black History Month 2024 series will be rebroadcasted on YouTube. So if you've ever missed prior session, there's been one already that has happened. You can catch up there. We're really excited about the podcast by Aisha Jenkins, the host. And obviously, there will be another incredible lineup of speakers for Women History Month series. But we're still in Black History Month agenda. So if you haven't registered yet, you can go to gisnorthstar.org/BHM/ and support the work of North Star of GIS. Donate. It might seem like it's just the two of us on this call, but there's a lot of hard work that goes into putting up these series for the rest of the month. So attend, reshare, and also join our melanated and mapping community. And as we celebrate the Black History Month and the impact of Black people all year long, let's carry this conversation forward and inspire change and growth in our communities. So thank you once again for your presence and engagement tonight. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. So my next event is actually tomorrow night, Mauritius time, same time. So yeah, happy Black History Month, Yariwo, and everyone attending tonight, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.